Merry f***ing Christmas, let's talk about anime. The end of the year is a fun thing as a creator. You get to kind of decide what to do, how to cap off another chapter of your portfolio, to celebrate the achievements and historical happenings in one piece to encompass a full solar orbit of your very own space rock. And guess what? It's the end of 2021, so I figured to really wrap up this year, the best piece to speak about would be Metropolis, the anime one. Now, I'm sure some of you are already grinning at the very passive-aggressive opening, having seen the film yourself and understanding its concepts and implications, and there's of course some of you bracing for exactly what I'm referring to coming into this blind. I am sure that everyone will be delighted regardless of their prior experiences, except, maybe the anti-vaxxers and anti-schmishmortionists who can f*** right off. Ooh, got that across early, feeling good today. People, Metropolis is a film based off a manga by the late great Osamu Tezuka, the creator of Astro Boy, Blackjack, and of course, Dororo, which we covered earlier this year. Great video, you should definitely watch it. And as a piece of art, it's kind of like one of those genetics projects, you see with the stars sometimes, like where the most talented and beautiful people come together and have kids that are literally bred to be perfect. Sure, it doesn't always work. Look at Jaden Smith, but I digress. Created 12 years after Tezuka-san's passing in 1989, Metropolis was directed by Rintaro, a former colleague of Tezuka-san's and known for his work on Galaxy Express 999, Neo Tokyo, X1999, and of course, one of my very dumb favorites, Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals. The movie was written by Katsuhiro Otomo, just the guy who created Akira and directed Steam Boy, and it was produced by Studio Madhouse, my favorite anime studio whose works span multiple decades and shelves in my apartment. So, this movie, it was just destined to be great, and it is. Literally every part of it, from the animation to the background art to the cinematography to the music, it's almost flawless. However, there is much more under that visual surface, so join me as we dig that shit up and feel things and think about 2021 and the future to come together so it's not scary. This is Metropolis. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, I'm fascinated by Japan. You probably are too. So Tyler and I decided it'd be cool to partner up with Bokksu to get you guys a sweet discount on Japanese sweets and snacks. Each Bokksu is themed and features snacks from all over Japan, some that you would be hard-pressed to find even on a tasting tour of the country. This month, I'm highlighting the Holiday Hokkaido box again because it has been my favorite so far, and hey, it's the holidays. Also, Bokksu comes with this neat little book that tells you what you're eating, what's in it, where it came from, and who made it. So there's really no guessing, I've for one gone to a market and picked up some stuff and been like, what the f is this? You're not gonna deal with that this time. You got some last minute shopping to do? Bokksu is a great gift that lasts all year. There's nothing better than that. And let's even sweeten that deal, pun intended. If you sign up before December 31st, you can enter to win a free trip to Japan, so make sure to see the description below for details and use our code Bonsai10 at checkout for up to $40 off of your subscription. Now is the best time to do this, so thank you for your time and on with the show. Now, a lot of what I have to say regarding the presentation of Metropolis I covered in our last video, which was on a show called Arcane. The feel of this film is sublime. Nothing is out of place, which makes it very easy to miss the subtleties if you aren't watching with your critique glasses. And that's a good thing. Masterfully created works of art are made to flow seamlessly. For instance, when you're driving down a highway through some mountains, you aren't able to see every insect, animal, and bird, every leaf on every tree, but it's all there, right? It's perfect in its harmony as your environment or your scenery. But then you pass by an accident or something and it's jarring. It distracts you and takes away from the simplicity and harmony that you were experiencing beforehand without even paying attention to it, right? In that case, you are going to be subconsciously jerked away from the whole to microfocus on the accident. It's not a great feeling, and likewise, you wouldn't want something in the scenery in a film to distract your natural focus on the main characters, their speech, or their actions. In a good film, everything comes together and is designed to direct your focus on what is important while creating a true-to-life experience. The background art of Metropolis is absolutely stunning if you do pay attention to. Now, if I told you simply that this was a film made by the dude who made Akira, you'd probably go into it expecting, Well, not Metropolis. But if you do look at the landscapes, especially the Undercity and some of the robot designs and the latter body horror, you can absolutely see Otomo-san's technical and mechanical mastery shining through the otherwise very Tezuka-esque, bright and bubbly stylized characters. And speaking of the Undercity, we should probably address the giant German elephant in the room that is the original 1927 silent film Metropolis by Fritz Lang. Now, these two films are not one-to-one. There's honestly very few similarities other than the themes of a dystopian future and uprising of the disenfranchised. Apparently, when creating his original manga, Tezuka-san had only seen a picture or like a still frame from the original Metropolis of a robot being born, and that was his inspiration. Also, for the record, I'm not going to be getting into the manga in this video, as the film and the manga differ pretty substantially, and I want to keep this as concise as possible. So, you got Undercity, robots, uprising, like what am I even talking about? Well, Metropolis isn't exactly peaches and cream. I mean, if you know anything about its creators, you probably would have guessed that, but this is one of those films that makes you think. And it also means that this is a film that can put you to sleep, as it's done to me many, many times, thanks to its very homey 1920s classic Art Deco vibes and color palettes, and its superb swing and jazz score. It's just very relaxing. Though it was made in 2001, it still has this feel of like a Disney classic, like Snow White almost, furthering the notion that I put forward in our last video of great animation being truly timeless. Metropolis will be as beautiful as it is now as it was then, until the sun dies out and the human race is blown to smithereens. There will never not be a time where this movie doesn't look gorgeous. Anyway, the film takes place in Metropolis, which is a grand multi-layered city rising ever upwards towards the new mega skyscraper, the Ziggurat, the newest and finest building created by the city-state's wealthiest citizen, Duke Red. He also happens to basically rule Metropolis, even though there is a president and a mayor, but that's because Metropolis is a plutocracy, meaning that it's controlled and ruled by the rich. And thank goodness Western democracies like America don't have insanely wealthy people buying politicians and people in power to further their own goals, because I'm pretty sure that would be highly illegal and a corruption of our entire political system.
Oh, I can't imagine the free people ever voting to send an army into an open-ended foreign conflict which profits only the few. That would be madness.
Metropolis does, however, have something that we don't, and that is a robot workforce. And I'm sure there's some smartass already hacker typing away about how we actually do have a giant robot workforce or something, but either way, it's nowhere near the level of Metropolis in this film. Though that isn't to say that we might be heading there someday in the future. Within the narrative, these robots were created to essentially make life better for humans, right? I mean, I have a Roomba. I can attest to that concept being legit. However, my Roomba has one job: to vacuum my house and scare the shit out of my cat. Sure, it can kind of map out the rooms, but it can't do my dishes or my shopping or anything else except its primary function. In Metropolis, robotics have gotten past the point of sentience and into self-realization. It kind of only makes sense that things would progress that way, right? Do you want a house full of robots with one function each? You know, like a robot to make your coffee, and a robot to get your food out of the fridge, and a robot to change the TV channel. No, you want one robot that can do everything, right? Exactly. However, the more advanced robots become, the closer they're going to become to being creatures rather than tools. You feel me? I mean, for instance, look at my cat Naro, right? He sleeps, he eats, he poops a lot, but he also likes to play and watch birds and do things for himself and clean himself. He's alive and self-aware, and he can't even vacuum my floor. Now try and tell me a robot that can process your commands and calculate how to carry them out accurately while taking into account the billions of possible variables that could occur while simply grocery shopping is just a machine? I don't think so. However, some people will, you know, because God didn't make robots or something. There's always an excuse to be a piece of shit. We know this. Now, in Metropolis, there is a bias against machines, as well as socioeconomic strife. A classic "they took our jobs" problem. And that's right, American Mexicans and British Polish people, one day it'll be the robots turking the gerbs. But I wonder if people will remember what it was like for them when that time comes. Because I know the American Irish sure don't, you know, unless they're complaining about Black Lives Matter. Now, of course, we're talking about people here, not machines. But one day, that line could become so blurry that it might not make a difference. Try to keep an open mind. Imagine having two robots, right, who interact with each other and work together. How would you feel destroying one day and having the other robot miss its friend? Is that cruel, or does it not matter because they don't have organs or something? I don't know, think about it. Anyway, so Duke Red, rich guy, right? Makes this massive skyscraper, calls it the Ziggurat, and on opening day, a robot accidentally disrupts the ceremony, so Duke Red's adopted son, Rock, just murders it. Which sounds pretty crazy, but Rock is the leader of an anti-robot paramilitary group named the Mardocs. Now, I'm not going to play around. Basically, everything bad that happens in this movie is Duke Red's fault. Maybe he's just a rotten egg, or maybe being super rich doesn't mean you're smart, capable of leadership, or a good person. I don't know. It could possibly instead indicate that you're greedy and cold. I mean, imagine having enough money to do something like solve world hunger or child poverty and just not doing it. Like, waking up every day and being like, I could feed the world, house all political refugees, save millions of lives, and then going, nah, I want to build a rocket ship to fly rich people for fun. You see, while rich people are off doing rich people things, it's everybody else that suffers. In Metropolis, you'd think that people would be chilling, right? I mean, they have robots to do all that heavy lifting. It'd make sense that it'd be like a renaissance for humanity, time to focus on philosophy and the arts, to weave fantastic stories and paint masterpieces, but no. Instead, everyone is fucking poor and pissed off at the robots for turking the gerbs, and all the money is being kept at the top with people like Duke Red. And if Duke Red is a bad guy, heaven forbid, he has so much money, how could he be bad? It'd be really convenient to have all the plebs all up in arms over what boils down to racism instead of, being mad at him, even though he owns all the money that isn't in the hands of the people and is in control of the politics of the city-state that he essentially bought. And this leads me into kind of a sensitive subject. I'm going to bring something up that may make you feel uncomfortable, but we're here to have a discussion and these things should be discussed. Slavery is almost unquestionably part of human nature. Hold on, let me finish. It is a practice that has existed since the dawn of civilization and continues to this day. It's been fueled by classism, race, gender, you name it, anything to differentiate somebody from somebody else. But why do you think that is? Most simply put, it is a 100% profit business, minus food and housing, and depending on what kind of slavery you're working with, you can skimp out on that stuff pretty good. But yeah, financially speaking, for the slave owner, free labor is a rocket to the top. See, the problem with slavery, besides, all the human rights issues, the inherent and inevitable flaw with it is that people don't like being slaves, and there will always eventually be more slaves than free people, which in turn always leads to a revolt, always. It's like lighting a fuse. Sure, the lights are pretty for a little, but when that fuse reaches the detonator, it's gonna blow your ass up. But that's where the idea of robots come in though, right? They aren't human. You can make slaves, as many as you want, program them to be subservient, make them solar powered, and run them on free energy from the benevolent sun, and create a utopia where no one goes hungry and no one has to work. That sounds awesome. I bet you could sell that to a lot of people who voted red last election. The problem is the details and the inevitabilities of that plan. The fact that human greed always goes too far. The desire for more and more doesn't just go away. The robots will need to be capable of more and more, and that's how you end up with robots that can think for themselves and maybe one day want to hang out instead of work on Sundays or some shit. But if your global economy is based off of a gigantic robot workforce going 24/7, simply taking Sundays off is gonna hurt some Duke Red out there's bottom line, motherfucker. See what I'm saying? And Duke Red types don't like their bottom line hurting. Anyway, it turns out that the Ziggurat is also a giant super weapon, one which Duke Red hired some sketchy scientist named Dr. Lofton to create the world's first android based off of Duke Red's own deceased daughter to be the living control mechanism for. You get that? But why would a rich guy need a super weapon? I don't know, maybe just in case those silly plebs figure out that he's the problem and not the robo-slaves with no rights? It's just a guess. But that would also explain why he has the president's top general in his pocket as well. It's funny, generals are often lauded in history, but it's also pretty much been generals that have been trying to get the president to press the nuclear button since, we invented the things in the first place. Something about being in charge of the military must make you militaristic. Anyway, like I said, inevitably, with slavery, you're gonna have a revolt. Like what would hypothetically happen if the Supreme Court was to do something crazy like outlaw Smishmortion or something like that. The people of Metropolis, of course, are so blinded by Duke Red's brilliance as a rich dude that they blame everything on the robots and the basically powerless president, who then in turn decides it's time to get rid of Duke Red, but is instead assassinated himself by said top general. Meanwhile, that android girl who can control this massive super weapon, Tima, yeah, she's fallen into the lowest part of the city with the nephew of the detective who was originally out to find that sketchy scientist who created Tima in the first place. She's just turned on and she's basically a newborn, and nobody knows that she has mechanical parts, not even her. The detective's nephew, Kenichi, teaches Tima to talk, and we get a good look at the base of Metropolis. Now here's one of the genius things about this film. The city itself acts as a visual metaphor for the strife within it. It's clearly a very old city, and like most old cities, it's built upon itself time after time until the bottom layers no longer see the light of day. Standing atop the city, both physically and metaphorically, is Duke Red and his ziggurat, the shining beacon of all that can be when you have unlimited power and wealth. Meanwhile, it's being, again, both literally and metaphorically held up by everything underneath it. The robots are forced to live in the dark, forgotten, and rundown Undercity, do the menial jobs that keep the city running, and the people live in the middle to upper areas but are generally too poor to experience the good parts of life that the upper city could provide. The fact that Tima is essentially born into the Undercity fundamentally changes her view of the world. When you are born on the top and spend your entire existence looking down, you have a skewed perspective. It's why white people will never know what it's like to be a person of color, for instance, or why wealthy, privileged people will never appreciate what they have as much as somebody who worked their entire lives to get it. It's why historically the third generation of a monarchy tends to fall apart, right? The grandfather fought from having nothing, the son watched his father do so, maybe helped, allowed him to appreciate where they started and where they got to, but the grandchildren have no point of reference. They're just spoiled. They think they deserve what they have and that it's inherently theirs, so they inevitably lose it. I think out of all of the characters in the film, Rock, the Duke's adopted son, the robot murderer racist guy, is kind of the weakest. He's literally just a racist, and he hates that the Duke kind of remade his blood daughter. He continually tries to kill her out of jealousy and hate, and triggers the climax of the film by shooting her, which reveals her circuitry and makes her lose control. And when this happens, the military protocol within her takes over and she integrates with the super weapon inside of the ziggurat and orders a bionuclear attack on humanity for robo-revenge. Because remember, she's seen what it's like to live as a robot, and though she's an android, she clearly empathizes with their plight and is not a fan of Duke Red, who, by the way, is killed unceremoniously by Rock in a suicidal overload of the super weapon, so quote-unquote, no filthy robots can lay a finger on him. Like I said, Rock is kind of weak sauce. So now all the robots are on a rampage due to an executive order from the now militarized Tima, but Kenichi is still trying to get through to her, and the ziggurat is falling apart thanks to Rock overloading the weapon. Kenichi eventually separates Tima from the thing, but she falls. Kenichi does catch her, but she's starting to slip, and before she falls, she asks, "Who am I?" Now, this is obviously a very important moment in the movie. I mean, it's the end, it's the climax, it's the big thing, but the question is very profound. I mean, sure, we take it for granted, but the question, who am I, is fundamental to most people's concept of humanity. A fish cannot ask, who am I? So we generally think they're just stupid animals. Obviously, that's been scientifically proven to be false, but if people listen to scientists, we wouldn't still be dealing with a mutating global fucking panini. Who am I in this scenario is also doubly profound, because you would think that Tima would ask, what am I? But in her final moments, that doesn't seem to matter. What she is doesn't matter as much as who she is. And there's a big difference between the two. Now, I'm gonna get weird for a second, so bear with me, but I think socially, we consider what's a lot more than who's. For instance, a what is your species, race, your gender, where you live, what you have, things you like, etc., etc. None of that is who you are. What's are additions to who's. And if you take away all the what's, you're left with something very, very difficult to explain or understand. Now, I believe I've asked you this before, but go ahead and try to tell someone who you are without talking about things you like, or the color of your hair, or your job, things like that. You're not left with much to say, yet you still exist. So exactly who are you? And who am I? I don't have the answer. This is a real philosophical conundrum that has confounded people for thousands of years, but that's the thing, is it's confounded people, and presumably only people. So for a robot to ask that question is a truly remarkable thing and proves its humanity to a certain degree. But if a robot and a human can be human or have humanity, then what is humanity? Again, I don't have the answer, but I would love to hear yours. And before I completely go off the deep end, I would just like to say thank you for sticking with me through this one. Honestly, I've been pretty depressed lately, and I feel like I got a lot off of my chest in this video without blatantly shoving it down someone's throat, so that was pretty cathartic. And also, there's no dislikes on this video, so clearly you agree with me on everything that I said, so thank you for that too. Thank you to Bokksu for sponsoring us again. I appreciate it. Don't forget to use code Bonsai10 at checkout for 10% off, and subscribe before December 31st to win a free trip to Japan. Shout out to our lucky patron of the week, Shady Cyanide, and to our high tier patron of the week, Cole, the Otaku Guru. Google us for social media. Merry things, happy whatever. I'm Mike. This is Bonsai Pop, and I'll see you next time.